Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to Aquarius Rising Africa. My, what a crazy week or so. I was woman down a week ago, so we rescheduled Jerry's show for tonight, and then literally had the worst floods here from I think Tuesday, Wednesday, the worst floods to the point that I've not had power for 3 days. And finally, the lights came on last night at I think 8 o'clock or something like that. So I'm very happy to be here. And a happy Saturday to you all. And of course, we have our favorite mental health expert, Dr. Jerry Marzinsky, who's we're going to be talking again about what if your thoughts aren't your own? What about the voices in your head? We always have very entertaining conversations with Dr. Jerry. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all in the chat again. Happy Saturday to you all. And Taram, Jerry, how are you? Thank you for accommodating me last week.
No problem.
How you doing? Nice to see you again. We missed you last month, right? You've been away for a
Yeah.
while. You've been gallivanting in Japan.
Yeah.
What you been doing there?
Just visiting, looking around. It was an amazing culture.
It
Totally
is.
amazing. Just everything worked like clockwork. The streets were clean, no garbage laying around, no vagrants on the street corners, nobody sleeping under the bridges. Everybody was busy. Trains ran on time to the minute. No graffiti anywhere. I mean, it was just very, very different from here in the United States. If you put graffiti on the walls, you go to jail.
Wow. No,
And
it's an amazing culture.
it
You
is.
know, they've got such um, all the Asian cultures kind of have a similar spirituality, although it's different, right? But it's kind of like very much based on the Buddhist type Zen understanding of life. So it's actually very beautiful to observe that in action. And
Yeah.
it's so true because in Japan, very much they operate like that. And I know as well, we were just saying that there's no such thing as stealing. If there's anything that gets stolen, I mean, you leave your. I had the same thing in Thailand, I got to tell you. I left my wallet I don't know how many times on restaurant tables or something like that. Eventually, you become so relaxed about stuff like that. You go back the next day, there it is. Not a penny out of it, nothing like that. That stuff like stealing just doesn't exist. Well, I definitely say in the bigger cities and the more obviously you're going to find that. But in the general, I found where I was living in Thailand, it was none of that.
Well, I was in the big cities, and like I was telling you a minute ago, there's somebody lost an expensive Nikon camera, and they hung it from a railing where people were going in and out of this big temple. I mean, it was a constant flow of people in and out. And we spent maybe an hour in there, and we came back out, and that camera was still hanging from that railing. That wouldn't have happened in the US. Somebody would have taken it.
Wouldn't last for 3 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. Wouldn't have lasted probably 15 minutes, it'd be gone.
Yeah, no, there's no chance that would last. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous, and it just shows you, to me, that's also sort of just a sign of an evolved culture, where, and I was saying because stealing in those cultures is it's not even, oh, you're such a bad person. It's more, you are pitied. You are so pitied for enacting such a low vibrational act. You're actually pitied that because stealing is not just stealing, it reveals a lot about your state of consciousness.
Mm.
If you feel the need to steal something that belongs to that says a lot about you. It says you haven't evolved in your consciousness at all. It says you are still running around with the cockroaches kind of things and feeling like you need to take everything away and hide it from others because you obviously don't have the courage to express or haven't understood you have the ability to, when you know, create that for yourself, get that for yourself, you know, get a job or whatever it might be, get money, whatever. It's interesting.
Well,
Very interesting.
in that case, the United States has a lot to learn from Japan.
I think we have a lot to learn. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in India as well as obviously Thailand. And I think we have a lot to learn from the Eastern cultures. That's for sure. I mean, we've got a lot to teach each other, for sure, you know. But I love because they really believe that the human misery, human suffering is in the human mind. And when you uproot the suffering out of the mind, like weeds, drawing weeds out of a garden from the roots, that's when you plant sweet golden mangoes, spiritually speaking, and then life changes, right? So it's very interesting. Wow. Anyway, so have you got anything else to tell us about Japan? Were you just like looking around, or you maybe looking at some of their medicines and what the way they do things?
It was just exploring. Yeah, the other thing that was really interesting is they're drivers. I mean, you go to San Diego or any big city in the U.S. and they're crazy. You know, they cut you off. They're speeding. They don't follow the speed limits. You know, they're just reckless, and there's a lot of accidents here because of people like that. That didn't happen in Japan. You know, they spend I think it's 2 months they have to go to school to get a driver's license, and then they have to pay $2,000 to get that license, and they can't get the license if they don't have some place to put their car. They can't keep it on the street. They have to have a driveway or some place where they can put the car because space is limited over there.
Right.
So they were very respectful. You didn't see people speeding. You didn't see people cutting each other off. You didn't see them tailgating, you know, darting in and out of traffic. You know, they were moving at a fairly quick pace, but it was always respectful. They weren't crowding anybody. They weren't cutting in front of one another. It was very respectful. You know, they which was interesting compared to, you know, downtown Tucson or California for sure. I mean, you can't leave a safe following distance in California. It's impossible. As soon as you leave enough space for a car to get in there, somebody will cut you off and get in there. You know, it's awful. Just doesn't happen. Doesn't happen.
You daren't leave a gap between you and the car in front of you because somebody's going to sneak in there.
That's right. Sure. And they'll just cut you off to do it. I mean, they'll cut you off with, you know, 2-3 feet in front of your car. They'll cut you off and do it. You know, I've seen people where you put on your blinker and instead of backing up to let you in there, they speed up so you can't get in.
Right.
So
very interesting. Very interesting difference in cultures. You know, over here as well, when we look at African people, they will always have like rip us off the Caucasian because we don't have patience. To stand in a queue, an African person has got the most incredible amount of patience to queue. And they will always mock us because we have no patience and we get very impatient and frustrated. And that just shows actually, like also right in the, as you're talking about driving in the cars, and that's actually that's a very good thing to actually reflect upon. You know, how we behave in traffic is actually a very, very, very good thing to reflect upon.
Oh, yeah, we have a lot of shootings over here for people cut each other off and then they stop their cars and they get in a fight or somebody shoots somebody else because of it. very
Yeah, the
impatient.
road rage. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
terrible.
everybody's
Road
in a
rage.
rush.
Mm.
That was the other thing in Japan. They were moving. I mean, their pace was very quick, but it wasn't there. The impatience that you were talking about wasn't there.
Mm. Yeah, it's more like a rhythm. They follow a rhythm,
Hmm.
and that rhythm works. That's what I've noticed with Asian people. You drive in India, and India's roads, when you look at it, everyone goes, "Oh my God, how on earth?" After day one in those tuk-tuks, my friend and I, we always had the same tuk-tuk driver. We realized very quickly these guys actually drive very intuitively, and there's a rhythm they follow. And if you driving the way that you might think is all safe and the way you would drive, yeah, you're going to cause an accident there, actually.
Yeah.
So because you have to be in the rhythm of how their energy works, and they're very, very intuitive. It's actually very beautiful. I love that.
Well,
Very, it's
I saw something similar when I visited Machu Picchu in Peru. We had a
right.
taxi driver, and they won't drive. They all have crucifixes on their mirror. They won't drive if their horn doesn't work. It's an essential piece of equipment, and they just it's crazy. I mean, you think San Diego was bad? I mean, Peru is like 10 times
No,
worse. I mean,
no.
me and a friend I went with, it was like, what are the rules? I mean, what are the traffic rules? We're sitting there trying to figure it out. Like, what's go? How did they do this? And they're cutting each other off, and they're just barely missing each other. They're blowing their horns at each other all the time, and it's like, well, what are the rules? What are the rules? So after a few days, we asked the guy, we asked the taxi driver, says, what are the rules? What And he goes, machismo. But nobody was hitting any other buddy. There were no accidents.
Exactly. Exactly, that's what I say. It's like a rhythm, and the cops are standing there. I mean, I don't, I mean, like I often saw cops in India standing there, and I'm like, why are you guys even there? They're just like standing, watching everything go by, and that one's in that direction, that one's in that direction. Everyone's going round, and no one's hitting everyone. That's the whole thing. It doesn't matter. They're in a rhythm, and they know exactly what they're doing, and that's super cool, actually. It's for us whiteys, we don't understand that. That's because we have no rhythm of our own. That's the
Oh
problem.
no,
That's
yeah,
actually the
that's
problem.
right. There's no rhythm. It's helter skelter.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's a totally different mindset there.
total. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I
it
love it
was. It
there.
was very pleasant. You know.
I love the Asian countries. I really, really do. Firstly, their food is superb.
Hmm.
Um, and just the people, the nature, the respect they have for each other. I mean, you can't help but have respect as well in the same way. They kind of bring it out in you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. Well, I'm glad you had a good time, and maybe you'll tell us one day. I'd love to actually know. I mean, just as a matter of interest, in terms of mental health and stuff that we talk about here on this show, what is that like in countries like Japan? I mean, and
Well, I
how
was
are the
keeping
how,
I was keeping my eye on that. I was I was wondering. Um, their their society is very pressured. You know, the
yes,
drive to succeed.
yes,
The drive to get ahead. They work long, hard hours, and a lot of people uh, become suicidal. There's some that just drop out. They just drop out of society. It's very pressured. They work, 10, 12 hour days, and they're all of them dress in suits. It was like at work time, this mob of people dressed in suits just appears on the sidewalk. It's like I called them the suits,
wow.
and hundreds of them all in suits, and they get off the trains, and it's like they just mob. It's like a flood of people in suits moving pretty quickly. They don't walk at a slow pace. You know, and uh, the pressure is intense. Um, the They're not getting married at uh, a high rate. the women who make good money, there, there's no space, and the salaries for the cost of the rent are fairly low because the apartments are very small. Okay, so they don't have much space, and the cost is fairly high. And then I heard of something called the suicide forest, which I'd never heard of that before. And what it is they have these dense forests in the mountains, so there's very limited building space before they run into mountains that are unbuildable or cost way too much to try to construct something there. So when people get too pressured, some of them will seek this suicide forest and go deep into that forest and kill themselves, and they're never heard from again. And I looked it up on Grok, and it was so prevalent that they started putting UV drones circling this forest because they were finding bodies there that have been there for decades. Right. So they're trying to hunt these people down that enter that area. It's kind of like our Golden Gate Bridge. Before they put up fences there, people would go to that bridge and jump off to commit suicide. So in the United States, there's 50,000 people a year kill themselves.
Wow.
So that's the report card on the psychiatric mafia's medications. And a good many of them are on these antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs, which cure nothing. They just
Wow.
dumb down the symptoms.
Yeah, exactly. We know it's so ridiculous. I know also in Japan, there's the pressure, as you say, it's very, very high. And aren't they also extremely clinical? Like everything, in terms of cleaning is,
Oh
the
yeah.
sanitization. I mean, that cannot be healthy to have an entire society that is so sanitized that everything is chemical, right? It's all about,
Well, I noticed some of them were still wearing masks. Um, Everything was clean. I mean, just everything was clean. The hotels, they were constantly cleaning. Um, we would have probably called it obsessive over here. There was
OCD.
no trash on the streets. There were no trash cans.
Mm,
Not anywhere you find a trash can, because at some point somebody threw a bomb in a trash can and some people got hurt. So all over Japan now, you can't find a trash can, but yet there's no trash laying in the street anywhere.
wow.
Apparently they carry it with them until they find a place where they can throw it.
Wow. That's wild,
It's a
actually.
totally different mindset. It had its pros and its cons.
Absolutely. I was going to say, for me, there's got to be a balance, in life. There has to be a balance in life. And we've got to be able to, also wade our way through some challenges as well.
Well,
Um,
the other thing I noticed is there weren't any police around. You go to any big U.S. city, you're going to see police all over the place. I mean, they're driving down the highways. They're all over the place. I saw one traffic cop in Tokyo. He was on a motorcycle. That was the only traffic cop I saw. The rest of them, they have these small police stations, and there were no police anywhere.
are they not being watched though? Are they not maybe have they not all maybe implemented some of these like digital ID type things where because I've seen that's been started in China. I've seen that. I've watched the documentary with that actually in China, where the Chinese are watched 24/7, and
I didn't see any cameras there. Like when I was at China, thousands, millions of cameras everywhere. There were cameras. Same way in Britain, everywhere. No matter where you went, there were cameras. The only place there weren't cameras were in the bathrooms. I didn't see any cameras in Japan at all. Maybe at the traffic intersections, but not on the street corners, not anything like China. They were all well behaved.
Very interesting. Sian is saying, yeah, young Japanese students, tourists wear masks in London. Yeah, they love them. Even the Thai people. I mean, long before the pandemic was there, you always saw Thai people wearing masks. I mean, on their scooters and things, they'll be wearing masks. You would think such high-tech people would know what all that was about. I think that's why I say I think there's so much emphasis put on cleanliness and chemicals, and the bathrooms, everything is clean chemically to the hilt. It's like one big just chemical station of cleanliness.
Yeah.
I don't think that's healthy either.
Well, I saw that, and then they had these electronic toilets that did everything. I mean, I don't even know how you would work one of those things. They had all these electronic controls on it for the water temperature and the vaporization, and I mean, it's like, whoa, what is this?
Wow,
it was interesting. So it's a totally different mindset.
But it makes me wonder then also, that's why I actually really, it's very interesting for me, Jerry, to chat to you about that, because when we're looking at that type of mindset, such a clinical mindset, right? And as you say, all dressed in suits, earning megabucks, earning well, living in tiny little matchbox apartments. It's like dun 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 dun, little people, right? Almost reminds me a little bit of Korea when you're looking at those Korean soldiers walking. I'm not saying it's as bad as that, but it gives me those same kind of vibes. And then suddenly something just snaps, where you just can't anymore, and you go to the suicide forest and you just decide to commit harikiri there, because obviously, but that would be a death of honor in Japan. And I know in Japan, suicide is not seen as an honorable thing. That's just from the culture. I know that. So I'm wondering, what are we looking at in terms of mental health there, Jerry? What is your take on that?
Well, I think you're right. At some point, some people just snap, and they disappear into this forest with no ID and just vanish. It's like they just eject out of society. But
Yeah.
You think about the United States with 50,000, that's as many people as were killed in Vietnam. 50,000 people a year are killing themselves in the U.S. And where are those thoughts coming from? Survival is one of the strongest instincts that are built into people. What is it that's overcoming that survival instinct, which is one of the strongest there, and overriding that? And these people, and it's not easy to kill yourself. It's very difficult. It's very stressful. And a lot of times when they're thinking about it for a long period of time, and then they decide on it, then all of a sudden they become very calm. And then boom. So with that many people killing themselves, nobody's asking where those thoughts are coming from. Before you act on anything, you have to have a thought. I mean, people don't just run around without thinking. There's a thought that comes in first, and then you act on that thought.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense, because when you are, Japan would be mainly high tech, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? So their society has a lot of high tech employees. They do a lot of, because I know they're very, very good at techie things as well. So I would imagine. So to me, that would be very little soul work. You're sitting with machines and technology all day long. right? You're living in a matchbox house. You are just like a sausage in a machine that's been put through the system. And it doesn't surprise me that their suicide rate would be high, because at some point it's there's no blood, there's no life in you, lifeblood. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm.
And then, of course, they would leave their mind open, um, wide open for all sorts of these entities, because that, in my opinion, is also a society that then leaves itself wide open for entities to take hold of those bodies. I don't know. What is your take on that?
Well, I didn't see any. They had these dragons and stuff like that, but I never did talk to any of them about the where they thought negative thoughts come from. A lot of them spoke English, but not to the extent where you could carry on a conversation like that with them. And I didn't meet anybody I knew well enough to start talking about that kind of stuff. But I knew they believed in hundreds of different gods, and that
Mm,
in the temples, when you enter the temple, you have to leave a space for the gods to leave, or shrine, these shrines, where these gods would come and go from those big things with two big things and a thing overhead. Um, but I don't know. I don't know what they thought about evil spirits or anything like that. I have no idea. But you know, here it's these negative thoughts that drive schizophrenia.
exactly.
And psychiatry has never researched those, and neither has anybody in mental health. The psychiatrist just went one day, well, we hereby declare that these voices that these people are hearing are hallucinations because we said so. You know, virtually all paranoid schizophrenics hear these voices that some of them believe are them, and some of them know they aren't them. Okay? In order for them to recover, they have to get to a place where they realize those voices aren't them or who they are. But what makes that very difficult is that they sound just like the thousands of other thoughts that go through a person's head during a normal day. There's no, we are the voices and you better listen to us because you're a piece of crap. There's nothing like that. They sound just like the thoughts, the thousands of other thoughts that you have in your head on a day. The difference is the intent and the content. Okay? The content is consistently negative, and the intent is not the intent of the person who's hearing those thoughts. Right? So that's very deceptive because they sound just like the person's thoughts. And when I was working the psychology department in the state prison, I ran into a number of prisoners who would ask these voices, "Who are you? What are you?" And they would say, "We are you.
Yeah.
We are you." Time after time after time, "We are you." So they wanted them to believe that these voices were who they are. And I think in a lot of cases with these 50,000 people who are killing themselves, they believe that those thoughts are theirs. Now, after I ran into enough schizophrenics who would say, they're mine or they're not mine. I mean, it's a struggle that they were carrying on. I wondered what they sounded like myself, because I'd never heard them, but I talked to hundreds of patients who did. And one day I prayed. I asked God, I said, let me experience these things. I don't know if I told you this story. Have I told you this story
You
before?
carry on.
Okay. So I asked them, I said, let me hear what these things sound like, because they couldn't tell me, it was like, uh, so nothing happened, for 1 week, nothing happened, 2 weeks, nothing happened, 3 weeks, nothing happened. And what I do, I lived on a lake when I worked at this giant psychiatric hospital. I mean, it was huge. There were over 200 buildings there. At the time I was there were 10,000 patients. So there was no scarcity of schizophrenics. And I was trying to figure out what's going on with them, what's going on in their heads. And I started to see patterns. I started asking them, what are these things telling you? That was one thing that really got my attention, is when I got to this giant psychiatric hospital, I'd been taught from years in college in psychology and counseling that these voices were just hallucinations. All right. And when you think of a hallucination, you just think of, garbage. It's like, doesn't make any sense. It's just, what do you call it? Verbal garbage. Yeah. So what I started noticing were patients were not only talking to these things, they were arguing with them. They were getting into shouting matches with them. I watched one lady who was leaving the hospital grounds and yelling at her voices that she didn't want to leave the hospital grounds. She didn't want to get in trouble as she was walking off the hospital grounds. Yeah. So they were carrying on conversations with these things, and it was like listening to somebody talking on a old time telephone where you could only hear what they were saying. You can't hear what the person was saying that was coming in. All right. So it was a coherent conversation. It wasn't word salad. They were talking to somebody and carrying on a conversation, a logical, coherent conversation with something or somebody that wasn't them. And I noticed that the more they listened to these voices, the more trouble they got into. Right? So I'm like, what are these things? And I started asking about them because nobody at the hospital knew anything about them, nor were they curious about them. So it's, they're just hallucinations. Nobody was curious about them, just me. So I'm like, well, what are they? What are they saying? What's the deal with these things? Nobody was looking into it. They bought the psychiatric mafia's explanation that they are just hallucinations. They make no sense. They're word salad. Don't even look there. Right. So I started asking questions after I saw that they were running patterns. And the first pattern I saw was that they were consistently negative. There wasn't any positivity to them. They were consistently negative, derogatory, insulting, abusive, destructive. And although they tried to play themselves off as helpers to start with, they would always return to that negative, abusive, you're no good, you're rotten, you're evil, you're stupid, nobody likes you. They're just pretending like you like you. Your friend, your girlfriend's cheating on you, your wife is cheating on you. It's always negative stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, well, why is it consistently negative? And it was. If it was a hallucination, why wouldn't it be some be positive, some be neutral, and some be negative? Why is it always negative? What held it onto such a negative trajectory? So I was wondering that. The next I found out they were anti-religious. They didn't like the person reading the Bible. They didn't like them going to church. They didn't like them praying. I'm like, well, what kind of hallucination would do that? So I started asking more and more questions about these things to these patients. And at that time, where I was working was this massive state hospital. Okay. So they didn't have any security there. If you upset a schizophrenic, you know, it, you were basically on your own with the help of attendants if they were around. So there was no security. So the unwritten rule at the state hospital is you don't do anything to upset schizophrenics that you don't have to. Only if they're out of control or something like that. You don't do anything else to upset them. So one day I was getting these answers from a number of the schizophrenics I was working with, finding okay, they're starting to run patterns. They're negative. They're anti-religious. What other patterns? And then one guy got upset. His voices got upset with me asking those questions, and they got him to go talk to his psychiatrist and complained that, hey, this psych guy's asking me questions about my voices, and I don't like it. He's upsetting me. Okay. The next morning, I ended up on the red carpet in front of this psychiatrist's desk, being ordered not to ask schizophrenics about their voices because they were hallucinations, and what I was doing was upsetting them and reinforcing their hallucinations and making them worse. Yeah. I knew that was bullcrap, but you can't argue back with these psychiatrists, you know. And he threatened me. You keep this up, there's going to be problems. You know. So that happened twice while I was at that hospital. Okay. They didn't even want you asking questions about the voices. They didn't even want you looking there. Yeah. So.
It would, I mean, my opinion is they probably have a good idea of what that is anyway. You know,
I don't think so. They were totally, they were all brainwashed. That's what
but
they were teaching.
I think like in the beginning, you know what I'm saying, when they started teaching, putting out this kind of medication and stuff like this, when people for the longest time have had this kind of mental afflictions, these guys would have known from eons ago what's going on. That's my opinion. And they don't actually want to heal it. They don't actually want to make it better
No, I don't
because
think they
it
do either.
serves them. It serves them to have like a whole lot of people in psych wards who are being traumatized like hell because of what they're hearing and you know what this condition is. And
Yeah,
it you know when we understand what it is, it's it's simple to get people out of it. I don't say it's easy. I say it's
there is a way. It's not simple. There is a way. It's hard work, but it can be done without medications, and we've done it a number of times. Okay.
that's what I say. It's not easy, but it's simple. The concept is simple. The person literally has to get they've got to get out of the matrix. They've got to actually move into a vibration that's how simple it is. You've got to get out of that low vibrating energy that sucks the living life out of you.
That's
Now the
exactly
question
right.
is, how am I going to do that? Now that's the part that for most people doesn't seem easy,
Well,
but it actually
the first thing they got to understand, which is diametrically opposed to what they're being told by psychiatry, is that these voices are negative parasitic entities. They feed off of negative energy. Okay. Now, what psychiatry is telling them is that their brain is broken. There's nothing they can do about it. They have a chemical imbalance in their brain, and all they can do is take these medications. So this is like Dante's arch, you know, all
yeah,
who all who enter here give up all hope. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And they're making worldwide, they're making $11 billion a year selling these antipsychotic drugs. Over 3 billion in the US every year. Not million, billion.
Brilliant.
They're making a fortune selling these drugs, and they're toxic. You know. So um,
I
it's
think
these voices. If you can get rid of these voices by any means, all symptoms of schizophrenia disappear with them.
yeah, exactly.
So you have to understand that it's the voices that drive paranoid schizophrenia and not any biochemical imbalance. They have no proof of that. That was a lie fabricated by Eli Lilly when Prozac came out. It was a complete lie, fabrication. They needed some way to explain why their antidepressants worked. They didn't know why. They thought it was some serotonin reuptake thing, that serotonin was being destroyed too quickly. That's been disproved over and over and over again, and they're still pushing this chemical imbalance nonsense to sell their drugs. They
Right.
have no objective test to measure a chemical imbalance of the brain. They have no proof that there is no imbalance that has been found by any research, and other researchers have published that over and over again, and now they're changing their tune a little bit, going, oh, it is now believed that, instead of saying it is.
Now
But
it's believed that, yeah.
now it's
Wow.
believed that. So the schizophrenic has to understand that these negative voices that they're hearing in their heads are not them. They don't belong to them, and that they're enemies. Okay. And the voices are trying to get them to believe that they are them. And if they ask them who they are, the voices will tell them, we are you. Okay. And if they believe that, then they're heading down a destructive path. If they start listening to what the voices tell them, they're on a path to self-destruction. So I was wondering what these voices sounded like, and if they sounded anything different than the person. And now, like I was telling you, I prayed one day, okay, Lord, let me listen, let me hear these things. So I lived on a lake then when I worked at that state hospital. And I'd come home from work and I'd go swimming. So I was like a fish in the water. I was already a certified scuba diver. I took, skin diving lessons, scuba lessons, diving lessons. I mean, I was like a fish in the water. I loved the water, comfortable in the water. And I would head out around sunset to go swimming because the number of speedboats on the lake was going down at that time. And one night I was heading out, and this was like 3 weeks or so after I asked that question, and it's hit my stride, and it was like meditation. I mean, I was just not burning any more oxygen than I needed to, and I was cutting through the water, and then water that day was just smooth as glass. There was no waves, there was no wind. It was bath water, warm, and I was just swimming, and then started feeling tired, and I came up and looked around, and I was far from the shore. And I went, well, okay, I'll just have to rest up. And what we were taught was a survival float, where you put your hands behind your back, and you just kind of lay in the water, and your face is underwater, your legs are hanging down below you, your head is in the water, and you're just floating there like a dead man. And then when you need air, you bring your head up real quick, you blow out all the old air, and then you suck in new air, because you start sinking right away. As soon as you blow out air, you start sinking, you lose your buoyancy, you're going down. So before your head goes under, you have to blow out all the old air and then suck in a whole big breath of new air, and then you still sink down a couple of feet, and then you pop back up and float again. And you can do that forever. It requires very little energy. So I look around and I'm like, yeah, I'm too tired to make it back to the shore. I need to rest up for a while. All right. And then I have this other thought comes in. It was getting near sunset, and this thought comes in and it goes, yeah, you're too tired to make it to the shore. I already knew that, and it's starting to get dark. Yeah, I knew that. And there was one other thing it said, but all three things were true. And I'm listening to this thing, and it sounded like a yes set, like a vacuum salesman might do. So it named the three things, and then it said, and you're going to drown, And I'm like, where did that come from? It wasn't my thought. I wasn't the least bit concerned about drowning. it wasn't anything I was worried about. It didn't come from me. I knew it didn't come from me because I wasn't worried about drowning. I didn't bring that thought up. It wasn't a
Yeah.
concern, you know. So I'm like, where did that come from? You know. So I go take another breath, and I'm on my way down. I'm sinking before I start floating again, and this thing goes, "You're sinking. You're heading for the bottom," and it repeats its yes set again. You're too tired to make it to the shore. The sun's starting to go down. You were sinking toward the bottom, and you're going to drown. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? Because I knew it wasn't me. I wasn't concerned about any of that, you know? And it's like, where's this coming from? And it was that same yes set again. So what I did the next time, okay, I got my air, and then when it was time to let the air out, I let enough out to where I, I didn't bounce back up. I just started sinking again. All right. So I started sinking toward the bottom. I remember having to clear my ears because the pressure from the water was pushing my eardrums in. So you had to repressurize them so they don't pop. And I'm heading toward the bottom. And then all of a sudden I hit the crush depth. It's where the water pressure is crushing your lungs. It's collapsing them. And your buoyancy is gone. So you start sinking like a rock. So all of a sudden I felt this sudden acceleration heading for the bottom. And I'm like, whoa, because this was weirding me out. So I was like, I don't know what's going on here. And when I felt that sudden acceleration, I shot for the surface again. Even before I got there, I knew what it was. It was the crush depth. I was, my lungs had collapsed due to the water pressure, and I was sinking faster than, I would at the surface. So I got to the surface again, and here's this thing again. You're too tired to make it to the shore. True. The sun's going down. True. You're heading for the bottom. Well, true. And you're going to drown. No, not true. So what is going on here? This was weirding me out. It was weirding me out. That thought wasn't coming from me because I wasn't concerned about it. And I'm like, what is it? So I headed for the bottom again. Okay, took my breath, let the air out. I started sinking really fast and heading for the bottom, cleared my ears a couple of times. And then I felt this ice cold something coming up my legs. And again, I shot for the surface because this is all weirding me out. Even before I got to the surface, I knew what it was. It was a thermocline. It's a layer of cold water that lays on the bottom. It's heavier than the warm water. It sinks and usually lays on the bottom of the ocean or the lake because it's heavier than the warm water. So even before I got to the surface, I knew what it was. Right? So I got up, I took my breath of air, and here comes this thing again. Right? You're too far from the shore to make it back. It's still true. The sun's going down, and if it goes down, you might not see the shore anymore. It's far off, and if the lights start going out, you might get disoriented. So it's adding this crap to it. And you're panicking because I came up fast and you're going to drown. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? So went down again, let the air out, sunk down and through the thermocline. So usually the thermocline it's floating on the bottom of the lake or ocean, but this one wasn't. I went through it. You could feel it. It was like frigid water. And then I went through it, and it was warm water underneath it, that same vast warm water. So this thermocline was probably still heading for the bottom. And, what happened is I felt this icky thing, kind of crawling up my leg. So I shot to the surface again. Even before I got to the surface, I knew it was the bottom of the lake. But I thought the bottom of the lake had rocks on it because as far out as I could walk from my shore where I was living, it was rock. So I thought the whole bottom was rock. So I knew it was the muck. I knew I hit the bottom. When I got to the top this time, this thing said, there's a motorboat coming at you and they can't see you and they're going to grind you to pieces. And I'm like, I didn't hear any motorboat. Usually you can hear underwater, the sound travels a lot further than it does in the air. you can usually hear a motorboat miles off. And I don't remember hearing it. Maybe I was distracted. But I turn and I look, and yeah, here's this motorboat coming right in my direction with this green light, navigation light. And here it is going. They can't see you. They're coming right at you. They're going to hit you, and that propeller's going to cut you to pieces. And I went, okay, big deal. I've had to dive below boats before. It's nothing new. I don't like it, but I can do it if I need to. All right. So I'm watching this boat come, and this thing saying, they can't see you. They're coming right at you. And I'm like, yeah, I see it, And it comes, and it's like maybe 50 feet or 75 feet away from me. And I watch it pass by. They didn't see me, of course. I didn't expect they would see me. It wasn't so close that I felt I needed to dive below it and stay there for a while. Okay, so it passes over, and I'm watching it pass. I'm not paying any attention to the wake that it generated. So I turn back around, and the wake washes over me just as I'm taking a breath of air in. Right. So I'm spitting out the water, and I'm coughing. And here's this thing again, you're drowning. And I'm like, what the hell is this? That wasn't my thoughts. I wasn't worried about drowning. I mean, it was just, I got some water in my mouth. No big deal. So and it goes, you're going to drown. So I go down again, let the air out, sink through the thermocline. My feet stick in the mud. Okay. So it was like goo. It was like, icky mud. And I'm laying there on the bottom with my arms extended about 6 inches off the bottom, like a dead guy. This is what I would have looked like if I had drowned. Okay. And I was too scared to think. I was expecting, and by now it's dark out. So it's dark down there. There's no light. I'm stuck in the mud at the bottom of the lake, just hanging there, waiting for something to come out of the dark to grab me. So I wasn't thinking, and all senses were shut down. There was no thought, because I was kind of waiting, anticipating something coming out of the dark and grabbing me. There was no sight. There was no sound. There was no feeling. There was no breathing. There was no disturbance. It was like I was dead. All senses were shut down. And it was like a peak experience. The only thought I had is, you're aware. I was aware that I was aware. That was it. It was just who you are, stripped of all sensory and mental input. It was just pure consciousness. And I'm like, wow. And I only could hold my breath for maybe another 20 seconds before I had to come up. But I sat there in just like this awareness, without a body, without thoughts, without any impingement. And it was like, wow, And I got to the top, that thing was gone. It wasn't there. Swam back to the shore. 2 weeks later, it was reported somebody drowned in that section of the lake where I was.
Wow.
So
that makes such sense because, I do believe that if people have died and they haven't, it's been a shocking experience, or they haven't been ready, or whatever it might be, the spirit does remain kind of earthbound. And I do believe that what you experienced there was probably something, probably a spirit, right?
it wasn't me. But the takeaway from this was I got my answer.
Exactly.
Those things sounded just like the thousands of thoughts that go through my head on a normal day. I mean, there wasn't any difference in the tone or the intonation. There was no, you're gonna drown. I mean, it sounded just like my normal thought.
And that's what, because we had a Sherry Sweeney, right?
Yeah.
And she was talking about the intrusive thoughts. So that would be, that's where we've been. Intrusive thoughts are as bad because it's exactly what you're saying. It was just you swimming and looking at a normal, okay, I've got to check whatever it might be, right? And then suddenly, boom, this really catastrophically horrible thought just like pops in there amongst the others. And what's amazing, obviously, Jerry, and I think it's good to mention this, is that you are super aware of these things. You are working with people who are afflicted by this all the time. So you were aware that this happens. You could see, but now think about someone, and I again go back to that suicide garden that we were talking about in Japan, and not only that, there'd be other area places like that as well, where people feel the only way out is to take their own lives. And when they have these kind of thought processes and these kind of energies wreaking havoc with their mind, that is very real. And
Very real.
those
So,
thoughts affect the emotions in such a negative way. And when your thoughts are down and your emotions are in a swamp, there's not much chance you have of
yeah,
getting out of that.
yeah, and you don't have the energy to fight back. You know?
Exactly.
So when
Exactly.
when Sherry says intrusive thoughts, that's exactly what these voices are. They are
Exactly.
intrusive thoughts. But the difference between regular people who have intrusive thoughts is that they're periodic. With schizophrenics, it's almost constant. They're telling them rotten stuff. You're no good. You're evil. You're rotten. Nobody likes you. Nobody loves you. Uh, just you may as well just go get it over with. Go kill yourself. They tell them that over and over. Just get it over with. They just, you know, and for years I was wondering, like, okay, uh, they're feeding off these people because it was clear that when I was working with the patients at the state hospital, they would tell me that after the voices attacked them, that they were so drained that they couldn't even get out of bed sometimes. And what they were, I said, well, did you use that energy? You were just laying in bed, tossing and turning all night. What? And they would say, I'm drained like I was working in the hot sun with a
Mm,
pickaxe all day.
mm,
And that was consistent. And
absolutely.
I did a little study. I'd ask them, how much energy on a 1 to 10 scale do you have before the voices come? How much energy did you have on a 1 to 10 scale after the voices attacked you? And it was consistently less after the voices attacked. So I'd ask them, well, where did that energy go? You didn't use it, you know? And they'd
Yeah.
go, well, I don't know, you know? And I'd say, well, listen, if you stuck your hand in a fire 100 times and each time you were burned, what's burning you? They didn't have any trouble with, oh, it's the fire. But I then ask them, I go, well, you've been hearing these voices for years. They probably come thousands of times over the period of years. And every time they came, your energy level was down in the dumps. Where do you think your energy went? You know what they'd respond? I don't know.
Right.
And then when I, I,
Wow.
I told them, the voices would get very upset. That's the last thing that the voices wanted them to know, that they were feeding off them. Because it's kind of similar, like if you had a big leech on your arm and you saw it, what would you do? Would you just sit there and let it sit there?
You. No.
No, you get it. Yeah, you get rid of it somehow. But if that
You.
if that leech if that leech was invisible and all you did was felt its symptoms,
Yes.
then it's a little harder to deal with. So
Right.
these things are energetic vampires. Okay, they feed off of negative emotional energy, which is
Yeah.
why they create that in the first place. That's why the
Exactly.
voices are never positive. They're always negative. They're always abusive. They're always putting you down. They're always generating negative emotional energy, and then they suck it off. So what these things are doing is the same thing we're doing to cows. You put them out to the pasture, they feed and they eat the grass, and then the farmer takes them and puts them in the barn and milks them. Okay, and that cycle repeats over and over and over again. So that's what these things are doing to us also. So they don't just hit schizophrenics, they hit us all. So every time you're walking up the street and you get this intrusive, nasty thought, you know, ask yourself, where did that come from?
Exactly.
You look at all the other inputs the body has. I mean, there's an inflow of light for you to see. There's an inflow of sound for you to hear. There's an inflow of flavor for you to taste. There's an inflow of air for you to smell. Okay, the whole body is an inflow system. Where do these negative thoughts come from? They flow in also. They don't
Exactly.
come from you. Just like sound doesn't come from you. Just like sight doesn't come from you. There's an inflow of light. No light, no sight. Okay? These sounds, these voice, these thoughts, they come in, they flow in. And what I wondered for a long time was like, okay, then why are they telling these people to kill themselves if they are the food source?
Right.
I had no idea. It didn't make sense to me. I mean, I knew they were doing it, but I had no idea. It didn't make any sense. Why would you kill your food source? You know, why would you kill a milk cow when it's giving you milk? You know?
Yeah.
Well, what it turns out that we're not like we're not milk cows. And what happened one day is, and you know, somebody listened to one of my videos and wrote me and said, "I know why." You know, they said if the person kills themselves, now there's a giant ripple. The family starts feeling guilty that they should have known it, they should have seen it, they should have done something. It's their fault, you know. So the entire family starts putting out negative emotion and feeling rotten. So even though that one guy's gone, all this negative energy is being generated from the family. The same thing is happening with these 50,000 people a year in the US who are killing themselves, all right? Despite having, you know, the most psychiatrists that had ever existed on the planet, the most psychologists that have ever existed on the planet, the most psychiatric drugs that have ever existed on the planet, you know, and still we're getting sicker and sicker mentally. People are getting worse and worse and worse. You look at the amount of violence that's going on here in the United States and in Africa and, you know, in Europe and I mean, it's getting worse. It's not getting any better.
No.
So if I were to give psychiatry a mental health score for what they're doing, it would be an F minus. You know, not only are they not helping these people, not only are they deceiving them into thinking that they are the only place that they can go for help. You know, these drugs that they're feeding them are extremely toxic. You know.
Exactly. So they're doing the opposite. It's the harvest, you know. It really is the harvest of what they want. They get people dependent on them, hooked on their meds. They've taken away our original. I did a show actually with Dr. York Prince a couple of weeks back on the Flexner report, right?
Yeah.
And how they actually
took over the system.
Yes, absolutely.
They paid off Congress and took over the system, made laws that they had to practice, you know, what medicine. There had to be drugs involved.
Exactly. And they've shut down more than 150 universities that were doing natural medicine and naturopathy, right? Anything like that. And also Black universities they closed down, as well as female universities or courses and stuff like that. So they've completely, over that time, they completely took over the medical mafia. And then, of course, they shut down all knowledge to things like water healing. I mean, water, we have to understand, healing with water is one of the most powerful things that there is, right? And sound healing, and all the natural ways that the body responds best to is what's been destroyed, actually.
Well, same thing with mace. We did a study. There's a 1 chance in 1,000 that the results being produced by mace are due to chance. Okay, so it's working. Now they took mace to one of the universities in Australia and showed them how well it worked. Now mace is the energetic psychotherapy. Okay, it works with energy, and it works better than anything else I've ever seen. The universities said, if you give us the patent to this, we'll maybe do something with it. Okay? Mace people said no. Okay. So they took it to the legislature and they said, hey, this should be used in your mental health centers. It should be used in your psych hospitals. They showed them how well it worked, and they just ignored it. Okay. So they don't want it out there. Okay. And, people I work with mace every day, the results are fairly dramatic. I mean, in an hour, depression is gone. These negative identities, they're gone. They're discreated. Okay. And it's like, if any of these guys had gone to a psychiatrist, they would have been drugged senseless.
Exactly.
They would have felt awful.
Exactly. Probably ended up in a psych ward as well, because that's what they love to do. And of course, isn't it interesting that when they're trying to punish people for, like really badly, they put them in psych wards.
Yeah.
And they really, that I think must be one of the worst things. It's like the guy we had on a couple of weeks ago, Jerry, the one who was he was sane and he went into the ward for mentally insane a couple of weeks back. Well, actually, a while back. We actually replayed that a couple of weeks back. How wild is that, right? To actually have to go through that as a sane person in a ward for the criminally insane, right? And still on the worst kind of meds, strongest meds ever. That is so crazy. Wow.
And it doesn't just stop there. I mean, here's some statistics from 2017. It's much worse now. In 2017, the psychiatric mafia had more than 7.2 million kids on psychiatric meds. Okay. And there were over 622,000 under the age of 5 on these psychiatric meds. Right. Over 80,000 of them were on ADHD drugs, which is a form of amphetamine. Yeah. Over 35,000 were on antidepressants. Over 85,000 were on antipsychotic drugs. These are the drugs that destroy the central nervous system. They slowly destroy the central nervous system. Over 389 of these kids were on anti-anxiety drugs, which are addictive. These people have no. It's drug. Everything is drugs. There's no concept of anything else other than drugs.
We have to work in harmony with nature. Nature is God in action, and the minute we start getting back to how nature works, and that's really what we should be giving ourselves, we're not going to heal. And to heal really just means to get back into balance. We're not broken. We're not screwed up. We really are imbalanced. We've got to find our balance again, come back to operating from the core of who we are, and then we're cool. So
don't be accepting every thought that comes into your mind.
Exactly.
You don't have to accept these negative thoughts that pour in there, telling you you're hopeless, you're worthless, you're stupid, that's them throwing those thoughts in there. If you buy into them, you make it happen.
Exactly.
And they'll just carry you right down that path until they got you.
Exactly. And that you cannot actually mess with someone who's connected. You can't connect. You can't mess with someone who's aligned and connected. So the whole job is to do the work, become aligned, become connected. And for those of you who haven't watched any of the protective patterning series on my YouTube channel yet, do that, because really at the end of the day, it's about understanding we've all created patterns through which we protect ourselves, methods that we use to um, convince ourselves otherwise. But at the end of the day, when we realize what serves us and what doesn't, and that's all about alignment. This is what this is about. It's about alignment. So to get ourselves into the alignment that we need to is really the answer that gets us out of everything that we need to be getting ourselves out of.
So those of you out there who are working with schizophrenics or obsessive compulsive people, you know, this list of patterns that there's 23 of them that these obsessive compulsive patterns run, or the schizophrenic voices run. Okay. They're on my website at jerrymarzinsky.com under articles. You can go look them up yourself, print them out. If you're working with schizophrenic patients, ask them about them. You'll see, they are actually experiencing these patterns. And if they're experiencing patterns, then these voices are not hallucinations. Hallucinations don't run fixed patterns. Right? All that information is there. Also on my website is the That's a Lie program. Came up with Sherry Sweeney, my co-author, who we wrote this book together. Okay, it tells about the psychotic voices and how we discovered that these things are not hallucinations. There's a program that Sherry wrote on there called the That's a Lie program. Okay, that works to help with these voices or obsessive compulsive thoughts. Okay, it's free. Just go get it.
Exactly. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate you, as always, sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us. And I want to just say thank you to everybody in the chat as well. And for joining us. I hope these conversations really help you guys. I want to encourage you to contact Dr. Jerry if you need to regarding the MACE method, because it really, really, really does work as well. To assist, and at the end of the day, we know that these things will connect to you, attach to you when you are in a lower thought process vibration. That's what it's about. And the more you get yourself out of that, and you are consistently in a space where you are joyful in your life, you're doing things you love, you actually in a much better place. That's when these things actually leave, because it just doesn't match with your energy anymore.
And
so we've got to do
work. They will try to drag you down.
Oh yeah, especially in the beginning.
If you don't resist them, they will try to drag you down like a shark attacking. They will try to pull you under. So you have to resist. You can't just listen to them. You can't just you have to realize that these thoughts don't come from you. They are not you. They don't belong to you. Right? And then resist the negativity, the anti-religious stuff. Realize that they're draining you. They're feeding off you.
Exactly. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you all. And I look forward to seeing you all next week again. Hopefully, guys, I've got more flood warnings next week. So, Tuesday, Wednesday, somewhere. I hope I'll be here without any more breakages out to the power and the internet. But Monday, I'll see you at 4:00 with Miles Johnston again, and then 6:00 with Guy Anderson. And we're going to be talking about human cloning, actually. And then, that's Monday. There we are on the schedule for Monday with that one. And thank you so much. Wow, I wish I could send you some of our water. Gosh, it's been wild.
I wish you could too.
I tell you, there's been guys with these drones, and you must see the area, how the mountain passes have washed away, how the roads have washed away. It is bad, 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 bad in terms of damage and stuff like that.
Wow.
So, Yeah. Thanks, guys. And on that note, I will bid you farewell. Have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful weekend. And happy Mother's Day to all you mothers out there. That's for tomorrow. I'm not sure if it's Mother's Day where you are, but I have Mother's Day here in South Africa. So to all you mamas out there, happy Mother's Day. Take care of yourselves, and I hope your bambinos treat you very good. Jerry, I hope you're treating your wife good as well. And on that note, guys, take care. See you with Dr. Jerry in a month's time. God bless you all.